Today, we have 2 hours of Dexter's mind and morality for you. So sit back, grab popcorn, and let's get started with, what is Dexter Morgan's IQ? From topping his med school class and mastering forensic science to engineering crime scenes so clean the FBI couldn't find a trace, Dexter Morgan's mind was the sharpest tool in the kill room. Let's break down how smart Dexter really was and how his brain made him one of the deadliest minds in television history. Starting with his academic intelligence. Before Dexter Morgan became Miami's most methodical serial killer, he established himself as one of the most academically gifted students in his field. His formal education and professional achievements created the foundation for everything that would follow, proving that his intelligence wasn't just instinctual, it was rigorously developed through years of intensive study and practical application. Dexter was in the top of his class in medical school and subsequently earned a degree in forensic science. His formal education included courses in biology, anatomy, chemistry, and mathematics. Medical school represents one of the most intellectually demanding educational paths available, with acceptance rates typically below 10% and requiring exceptional performance across multiple scientific disciplines. For Dexter to reach top of his class meant that he was competing against and defeating some of the brightest minds in the country. The transition from medical school to forensic science wasn't a step down, it was a strategic pivot that required mastering an entirely new field. With that, he demonstrated his knowledge on various topics, including history, anthropology, psychology, botany, philosophy, architecture, sociology, economics, religious lore, art, literature, law, and criminology. This breadth of knowledge suggests an intellectual curiosity that extended far beyond his professional requirements, indicating the kind of polymathic intelligence typically associated with gifted individuals. Dexter's professional competence at Miami Metro Police Department was exceptional. The fact that he could state exactly 2,103 cases without hesitation suggests a mind that cataloged and retained information with remarkable accuracy. His specialization in blood spatter analysis required mastering physics, fluid dynamics, and biomechanics at a level that few forensic analysts achieve. Dexter has a precise knowledge of his work field, and thanks to his interest in blood, he proficiently solves criminal cases. To Dexter, the blood doesn't lie. This expertise was innovative thinking that allowed him to reconstruct crime scenes with uncanny accuracy, often seeing patterns and details that escaped his colleagues. The academic rigor required for his position extended beyond textbook knowledge into practical application under pressure. Dexter also served as an expert witness in court proceedings and is certified to photograph crime scenes. Expert witness testimony demanded the ability to explain complex scientific concepts to lay audiences while withstanding aggressive cross-examination from defense attorneys trying to discredit his findings. This required not only deep knowledge, but the intellectual agility to think on his feet and communicate effectively under adversarial conditions. Even his colleagues recognized his exceptional abilities. Detective Mike Anderson judged Dexter to be an exceptionally good deductive analyst and wondered how a pro like him could stand working with Miami homicide chuckleheads. This professional recognition from experienced detectives suggests that Dexter's analytical abilities stood out even among seasoned law enforcement professionals, marking him as intellectually superior to his peers. Perhaps most impressive was his ability to maintain this level of academic and professional excellence while concealing his true nature. The cognitive load of simultaneously excelling in forensic analysis while planning and executing murders required compartmentalization skills that spoke to extraordinary mental discipline and organizational capacity. I think what made Dexter's academic intelligence so remarkable was how he weaponized it. Every piece of knowledge became a tool for his darker purposes. But formal education was just the beginning of what made his mind so dangerous, because his ability to plan and strategize would prove even more terrifying when applied to murder. Dexter Morgan's ability to orchestrate elaborate murders while maintaining his facade as Miami's most dedicated blood spatter analyst revealed a level of strategic intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. His methodical approach to killing demonstrated masterclass level long-term planning, risk management, and operational security that would make military strategists envious. Every aspect of his double life required systematic thinking that eliminated variables through methodical preparation. The pinnacle of Dexter's strategic brilliance emerged during Season 4's Trinity Killer investigation, where he executed perhaps the most complex psychological operation in television history. While Miami Metro hunted Arthur Mitchell, Dexter positioned himself as both the hunter and student, shadowing Trinity to learn his methods while simultaneously planning his demise. This required him to compartmentalize his official duties as a forensic analyst, helping the investigation while secretly conducting his own parallel investigation. This cognitive load of maintaining these dual perspectives, feeding information to his colleagues while withholding crucial discoveries, demonstrated extraordinary mental discipline and strategic foresight. Arthur Mitchell had operated undetected for over 30 years, perfected a killing cycle that spanned multiple cities and victim types. For Dexter to infiltrate this system required him to create an entirely fabricated identity as Kyle Butler, complete with backstory, motivations, and believable personal details. He researched Trinity's patterns, identified vulnerabilities in his routine, and slowly insinuated himself into Arthur's life. The psychological chess match between them required Dexter to simultaneously appear weak enough to be mentored while strong enough to be trusted, all while gathering intelligence for the perfect kill. Meanwhile, Dexter was juggling an increasingly complex personal life with Rita and the children. Season 4 showcased his ability to compartmentalize on multiple levels, managing crime scenes during the day, family dinners in the evening, and late-night reconnaissance missions tracking Trinity. The mental bandwidth required to maintain these separate identities without allowing them to contaminate each other spoke to cognitive abilities far beyond average intelligence. When Arthur discovered Dexter's true identity and threatened his family, Dexter's response was swift and decisive, proving his contingency planning had anticipated even the worst-case scenario. Perhaps most impressive was Dexter's creation and maintenance of his kill rooms, which represented applied engineering psychology combined with forensic countermeasures. Each location required careful selection based on isolation, accessibility, and disposal logistics. The plastic sheeting, table setup, and tool arrangement followed precise specifications developed through years of refinement. Every element served dual purposes, containing evidence while creating the ritualistic environment his dark passenger demanded. The fact that he never once left exploitable forensic evidence, despite dozens of kills, demonstrated systematic thinking that eliminated variables through methodical preparation. Dexter's long-term planning capabilities extended beyond individual kills to encompass year-long strategies for maintaining his cover. He cultivated relationships with law enforcement precisely because proximity to investigations provided early warning systems and influence over evidence interpretation. His romantic relationships served as strategic assets that reinforce his carefully constructed normal guy persona while providing emotional camouflage for his true nature. The sophistication of his planning showed in how he anticipated and prepared for multiple contingencies. When Paul Bennett returned from prison and threatened to disrupt his relationship with Rita, Dexter didn't simply react. He executed a carefully orchestrated frame job that sent Paul back to prison while appearing completely uninvolved. This required understanding Paul's psychology, predicting his behavior patterns, and creating a scenario that would naturally lead to Paul's downfall without any connection to Dexter. His strategic thinking even extended to crime scene analysis, where he would deliberately feed information to his colleagues at precisely the right pace to guide investigations towards his preferred outcomes. This required understanding of how his fellow detectives thought, predicting their investigative approaches, and subtly influenced their conclusions while appearing to be nothing more than a helpful forensic analyst. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation proved Dexter's most sophisticated strategic thinking when his own dumping ground was discovered. Rather than panicking, he methodically analyzed the investigation's progress, identified the key players, and developed multiple strategies for misdirection and evidence elimination. His ability to stay several steps ahead of both the FBI and his colleagues while maintaining his facade required strategic planning that operated on multiple timelines simultaneously. What made Dexter's strategic intelligence so terrifying was how effortlessly he maintained these multiple complex systems simultaneously. Like this deep dive into Dexter's brain? Make sure to subscribe. We've got more breakdowns on the way that cut even deeper. Dexter's mind operated like a master chess player, thinking 15 moves ahead, and he proved it every step of the way with his emotional intelligence and manipulation. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, Dexter Morgan did demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of human psychology that bordered on genius-level emotional intelligence. His ability to read people, manipulate their feelings, and maintain complex relationships while concealing his true nature required psychological insight that most trained therapists would envy. This systematic emotional engineering allowed him to hide in plain sight for decades while maintaining deep connections that served his purposes. The foundation of Dexter's emotional manipulation was his uncanny ability to understand what people wanted to hear and feel. When Rita confided her fears about their relationship, Dexter knew exactly how to respond with the right balance of vulnerability and reassurance. His marriage proposal came directly from studying an obsessive stalker's tactics, yet he delivered those borrowed words with such apparent sincerity that Rita never suspected their artificial origin. This pattern repeated throughout their relationship, Dexter constantly analyzing Rita's emotional needs and providing precisely the responses that would maintain her attachment without requiring genuine reciprocal feelings. His manipulation of colleagues at Miami Metro demonstrated even more sophisticated psychological awareness. With Vince Masuka, Dexter understood that casual deflection and dry humor would satisfy Masuka's curiosity without arousing suspicion. When Vince pressed him about his relationship problems, saying, "I saw Rita kissing another dude at Thanksgiving," okay? Dexter immediately responded with calm acknowledgement that Rita had already told him, instantly diffusing Masuka's concern and positioning himself as the understanding partner rather than the victim. The complexity of his emotional manipulation reaches peak during interrogations and suspect interviews. Dexter's forensic work regularly put him in contact with criminals and witnesses, and he constantly demonstrated an ability to make people comfortable enough to reveal crucial information. His colleagues noted his skill in this area, with Detective Mike Anderson specifically commenting on Dexter's exceptional abilities as a deductive analyst. This psychological manipulation made suspects trust him enough to incriminate themselves while viewing him as a sympathetic ally rather than a threat. Perhaps most impressive was Dexter's relationship management with his sister Deborah. For years, he successfully maintained the facade of a caring, protective brother while secretly using her police work to advance his own killing agenda. He provided just enough emotional support to keep her dependent on him, while carefully steering conversations away from topics that might expose his true nature. When Deborah finally discovered his secret in season 6, Dexter's initial response was to deploy his most sophisticated manipulation yet, convincing her that killing Travis Marshall was an impulsive act of justice rather than the calculated murder it actually was. His ability to maintain romantic relationships while feeling no genuine emotional connection required extraordinary psychological insight. Rita later remarked that Dexter seemed to know exactly what she needed at every moment, which she interpreted as exceptional empathy rather than recognizing it as calculated observation and response. He studied her patterns, learned her triggers, and provided precisely the emotional feedback required to maintain her attachment without ever risking genuine intimacy that might expose his nature. The maintenance of his professional relationships demonstrated equally sophisticated emotional intelligence. His choice to date Rita, a mother with 2 children whose abusive husband was in jail, represented strategic selection rather than random attraction. Dexter chose Rita specifically because her trauma history made her less likely to demand emotional intimacy, while her status as an abuse survivor made his protective instincts appear noble rather than controlling. Even his manipulation of adversaries showed remarkable psychological acuity. When Joey Quinn began investigating him after Rita's death, Dexter understood that direct confrontation would only increase suspicion. Instead, he used Quinn's relationships with Deborah as leverage, allowing Deborah's loyalty to naturally create pressure on Quinn to abandon his investigation. This demonstrated strategic emotional thinking that considered multiple psychological variables and their interconnections. His understanding of motivations and weaknesses extended to reading people's deepest fears and desires. During interrogations, Dexter could identify which suspects were lying, which were desperate for approval, and which could be manipulated through flattery or intimidation. He tailored his approach to each personality type, becoming whatever version of himself would be most effective in extracting information or maintaining his cover. The sophistication of his emotional manipulation showed in how he managed multiple relationships simultaneously without any of them interfering with each other. His colleagues saw him as a dedicated professional, Rita saw him as a loving partner, Deborah saw him as a protective brother, and his victims saw him as either a trusted confidant or a righteous avenger, depending on the needs. What made Dexter's emotional intelligence so terrifying was how systematically he deployed these abilities. Every relationship became a chess game where you knew exactly which emotional moves would produce his desired outcomes. But even this sophisticated understanding of human psychology would prove secondary to how he dealt with the hardest part about being a serial killer: adaptability under pressure. Dexter Morgan's quick thinking in crisis situations revealed his high fluid intelligence and ability to improvise solutions under extreme stress. When his carefully laid plans crumbled or unexpected threats emerged, Dexter consistently demonstrated the cognitive flexibility to pivot strategies in real time while maintaining his cover. His performance under pressure separated him from methodical killers who relied solely on routine. Dexter thrived when chaos demanded immediate adaptation. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation represents the ultimate test of Dexter's adaptability, when his underwater dumping ground was discovered by scuba divers. 38 days after killing his brother Brian, 18 of Dexter's victims were suddenly exposed to federal scrutiny. This discovery threatened everything that he had built over years of careful killing. Rather than fleeing or panicking, Dexter immediately began analyzing the investigation's methodology, identifying key personnel, and developing countermeasures to stay ahead of both the FBI and his increasingly suspicious colleague, James Dokes. Sergeant Dokes presents a unique challenge that required constant tactical adaptation. Dokes was suspicious of Dexter from the beginning, questioning why a lab geek had studied advanced jiu-jitsu in college and expressing disbelief that someone of Dexter's apparent intelligence would settle for blood spatter work. When Dokes began following him, Dexter had to completely alter his operational procedures while maintaining the appearance of normal behavior. This meant developing new routes to avoid surveillance, creating false destinations to throw out pursuit, and even staging fake emergencies to provide cover for his movements. The pressure intensified when FBA Special Agent Frank Lundy arrived to lead the Bay Harbor Butcher Task Force. Lundy's methodical approach and psychological profiling expertise meant Dexter faced an adversary who understood the serial killer mentality. Dexter had to study Lundy's investigative methods while participating in the very investigation targeting him. This required extraordinary compartmentalization, analyzing evidence during the day while ensuring his own activities left no traces that would fit the emerging profile. When Dokes discovered Dexter's cabin and kill tools, the situation demanded immediate crisis management. Dexter's response demonstrated remarkable tactical thinking under ultimate pressure. He couldn't simply kill Dokes without raising suspicions, so he improvised a kidnapping scenario that would keep Dokes alive while providing time to develop a permanent solution. This required rapid problem solving that considered multiple variables: Dokes' police training, the timeline before he would be missed, and the logistics of containing someone who knew his secret. The Lila Tournay's situation showcased another form of adaptability when external factors threatened his carefully constructed plans. When Lila discovered his secret and became obsessed with him, Dexter had to navigate an unpredictable personality who didn't respond to his usual manipulation tactics. Her erratic behavior and willingness to burn down buildings meant traditional strategic planning was ineffective. Dexter had to rely on real-time decision-making and rapid response to her increasingly dangerous actions. During the Trinity Killer confrontation, Dexter's adaptability reached its peak when Arthur Mitchell discovered his true identity and threatened his family. The psychological warfare between them required constant tactical adjustments, as each tried to outmaneuver the other. When Arthur killed Rita as retaliation, Dexter had to process devastating personal loss while maintaining his cover story to investigators. This demonstrated emotional compartmentalization under the most extreme psychological pressure. His split-second decision-making during kills showed remarkable cognitive ability when situations deviated from his planned scenarios, whether dealing with unexpected witnesses, equipment failures, or victims who fought back differently than anticipated. Dexter consistently adapted his methods without leaving additional evidence. This required the mental flexibility to abandon carefully rehearsed procedures and improvise equally effective alternatives under time pressure. The Miguel-Prado relationship tested Dexter's adaptability when his attempt to share a secret backfired dramatically. When Miguel began killing people who didn't fit Harry's code, Dexter had to develop strategies to contain and ultimately eliminate someone who knew his methods and weakness. This required completely rethinking his approach to trust and partnership while maintaining the friendship facade that kept Miguel from becoming suspicious. Dexter survived because he adapted faster than anyone else. Hit that like button if you're seeing just how far ahead he really was. His ability to think clearly under pressure consistently saved him from exposure, but even more crucial to his long-term survival as both a forensic analyst and a serial killer was learning and self-improvement. Dexter constantly evolved his method throughout the series, demonstrating a high learning capacity that separated him from static criminals who relied on unchanging patterns. His ability to analyze his own performance, identify weaknesses, and systematically improve his techniques showed the kind of metacognitive awareness typically associated with superior intelligence. This continuous self-optimization allowed him to stay ahead of advancing forensic technology and increasingly sophisticated law enforcement methods. His kill techniques underwent continuous refinement based on practical experience and lessons learned from near misses. Early in the series, Dexter's methods were effective, but relatively crude compared to his later sophistication. He gradually developed more efficient sedation techniques, improved his plastic sheeting arrangement for better containment, and perfected his dismemberment methods to minimize cleanup time and evidence traces. Each kill became a learning opportunity where he mentally cataloged what worked well and what could be improved for future encounters. The evolution of his disposal methods demonstrated remarkable adaptive learning. Initially, Dexter simply weighted body parts and dropped them into the Gulf Stream. However, when the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation discovered his dumping ground, he immediately recognized the flaw in his approach and developed new disposal techniques that eliminated this vulnerability. This showed his ability to learn from catastrophic near exposure and completely redesign his operational procedures based on new information. Dexter's response to advancing forensic technologies revealed his capacity for proactive learning rather than reactive adaptation. As DNA analysis became more sophisticated and crime scene processing evolved, Dexter stayed ahead of these developments through his professional position. He studied new forensic techniques during the day and immediately incorporated countermeasures into his nighttime activities. This required the intellectual flexibility to understand both sides of the forensic science equation, how evidence was collected, and how to prevent its collection. His self-analysis and introspection reached levels that most people never achieve in legitimate therapy. Dexter constantly examined his own motivations, behaviors, and emotional responses through his internal monologue. He recognized patterns in his thinking, identified triggers for his dark passenger, and developed strategies for managing his urges while maintaining his facade. This level of psychological self-awareness required exceptional metacognitive abilities and the intellectual honesty to confront uncomfortable truths about his nature. The improvement in his manipulation techniques showed systematic learning from social interactions. Early relationships, like his initial encounters with Rita, were somewhat clumsy. As Dexter learned to navigate normal human emotions he didn't naturally understand. Over time, his ability to read people and provide appropriate responses became increasingly sophisticated. He developed a repertoire of emotional reactions and responses that he could deploy based on situational analysis, essentially building a comprehensive database of human behavior patterns. His professional development at Miami Metro demonstrated continuous learning that enhanced both his legitimate career and his secret activities. Dexter actively pursued advanced training in forensic techniques, attended conferences, and stayed current with industry developments. This professional growth provided him with increasingly sophisticated tools for both solving legitimate cases and covering his own tracks. His ability to excel in his day job while using that knowledge for criminal purposes required remarkable compartmentalization and applied learning. Learning from mistakes became one of Dexter's most crucial survival skills. When Paul Bennett's shoe was left behind during their confrontation, Dexter immediately recognized his oversight and developed checklists to prevent similar errors. When Lila Tourney discovered his secret through careless behavior, he analyzed what went wrong and implemented new security measures for future relationships. Each near exposure became a case study that informed improved protocols. His adaptation to different victim types showed his remarkable learning flexibility. Early targets were relatively straightforward criminals, but as Dexter encountered more sophisticated adversaries like Arthur Mitchell or Miguel Prado, he had to develop new approaches. He learned to study each target's psychology, identify their specific vulnerabilities, and tailor his approach accordingly. This required moving beyond formulaic killing to dynamic, individualized strategies. The development of his emotional understanding represented perhaps the most impressive learning achievement. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, Dexter gradually developed a functional understanding of love, grief, anger, and other human feelings through careful observation and analysis. His relationship with Rita and his children forced him to learn behaviors and responses that initially felt foreign, but eventually became somewhat natural through practice repetition. His forensic knowledge continued expanding throughout the series, with Dexter incorporating new scientific developments into his work. Even after faking his death and spending years away from active forensic work, he retained and applied this knowledge in Dexter New Blood, showing that his learning had created lasting cognitive changes rather than temporary behavioral modifications. Dexter's remarkable capacity for continuous learning and self-improvement demonstrated intellectual abilities that went far beyond mere criminal mind. But the relationship between his intelligence and psychopathic nature led to another question, one that almost everyone found themselves asking. How much of Dexter Morgan's intelligence came from his psychopathy versus his natural ability represents one of the most fascinating psychological questions in the series. Research on psychopathy and intelligence reveals a complex relationship that explains both the source and application of Dexter's cognitive abilities. His dark passenger fundamentally altered how his mind processes information, emotions, and social interactions. Meta-analytic research reveals that a small but significant negative relationship between intelligence and total psychopathy, with correlations around R equals -0.07. However, this relationship becomes more nuanced when examining specific psychopathy factors. Primary psychopathy traits, particularly those involving interpersonal manipulation and emotional detachment, show different intelligence correlations than secondary psychopathy traits, involving impulsivity and antisocial behavior. Dexter exemplified the high-functioning primary psychopath, whose intelligence remained intact or even enhanced by his emotional deficits. The lack of emotional interference allowed Dexter to apply pure logic to situations where others would be compromised by fear, empathy, or moral uncertainty. Research demonstrates that psychopathic individuals show decreased brain activity in the right lateral basal amygdala and dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, regions crucial for emotional processing and moral reasoning. This neurological configuration enables Dexter to analyze crime scenes, plan murders, and manipulate people without the emotional static that typically clouds human judgment. Clecky's concept of mask of sanity requires exceptionally high social intelligence to maintain successfully. Despite claiming to lack genuine emotion, psychopathic individuals demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how emotions work in others, allowing them to mimic appropriate responses. Dexter's ability to maintain long-term relationships with Rita, Deborah, and his colleagues required constant performance of emotional reactions he didn't naturally feel. This cognitive understanding of emotion, combined with his analytical nature, created a form of emotional intelligence that was entirely intellectual rather than intuitive. The trauma that created Dexter's dark passenger may have enhanced rather than damage his cognitive abilities through a process of adaptive specialization. Witnessing his mother's murder at the age of 3 forced his developing brain to create survival mechanisms that prioritize logical analysis over emotional response. Research suggests that early trauma can lead to hypervigilance and enhance pattern recognition as protective adaptations. Dexter's exceptional ability to read crime scenes and predict human behavior may have developed as a neurological compensation for his emotional deficits. His psychopathic traits eliminate the cognitive interference typically caused by empathy, guilt, and moral uncertainty. While normal individuals experience mental conflict when considering harmful actions, Dexter's brain bypassed these emotional warning systems entirely. This allowed him to process information about violence, death, and human suffering with the same clinical detachment he applied to blood spatter analysis. The absence of emotional conflict freed up cognitive resources for pure analytical thinking. The requirement to maintain his facade demanded extraordinary metacognitive abilities, essentially thinking about thinking on multiple levels simultaneously. Dexter had to monitor his own behavioral expressions while analyzing others' reactions and adjusting his performance accordingly. This constant self-monitoring and social calculation developed his intellectual capabilities beyond what might have occurred naturally. His intelligence became weaponized through necessity, sharpened by years of concealing his true nature. Research indicates that successful psychopaths often demonstrate higher intelligence than unsuccessful ones, particularly in areas involving planning and manipulation. Dexter's ability to avoid detection for decades while maintaining professional success exemplified this pattern. His psychopathy provided the emotional detachment necessary for long-term strategic thinking, without being compromised by immediate emotional needs or moral concerns that derail less intelligent psychopaths. The systematic deficit, described by Klecki, the inability to emotionally understand the meaning of life as lived by ordinary people, paradoxically enhanced Dexter's analytical abilities. While he couldn't intuitively understand human emotions, he became exceptionally skilled at studying and categorizing them systematically. His approach to human psychology resembled scientific observation rather than natural empathy, creating a form of emotional intelligence that was more comprehensive and reliable than genuine feeling. Studies show that psychopathic individuals often score higher on certain cognitive tasks, requiring emotional detachment, such as more reasoning problems, where emotional considerations would typically interfere with logical analysis. Dexter's ability to make life and death decisions based purely on his code, without being swayed by personal attachments or emotional manipulation, demonstrates this cognitive advantage in action. The neuroplasticity of his developing brain likely adapted to maximize the advantages of his psychopathic traits while minimizing their social costs. His intelligence became specialized for his unique circumstances, enhanced pattern recognition for identifying killers, superior emotional regulation for maintaining his facade, and exceptional strategic planning for executing murders without detection. What made Dexter's intelligence so remarkable was how his psychopathy both enhanced and focused his cognitive abilities. And while it seems like he's the type of person that couldn't exist in real life, he might not be as far from reality as we think. How Dexter's portrayed intelligence compares to actual documented cases reveals whether his character represents realistic genius or pure fiction. The average IQ of serial killers is 94.5, according to the Serial Killer Information Center, making Dexter's exceptional abilities remarkable by comparison. Ted Bundy represents the closest real-world parallel, with a reported IQ of 124 to 136. Like Dexter, Bundy used intelligence strategically, studying psychology, manipulating victims through fake authority, and representing himself in court. However, Bundy's intelligence was undermined by impulsivity and ego. His careless self-introduction as Ted provided investigators crucial leads, while Dexter avoided making such mistakes through superior emotional control. Dennis Rader had that methodical planning edge that was similar to Dexter's operational style, operating undetected for 3 decades while maintaining his community facade. However, Rader's downfall came from narcissistic hunger for attention, resuming police communication and sending traceable floppy disks. This showed that methodical intelligence without emotional discipline leads to exposure. The Zodiac Killer was a master of sophisticated cryptographic abilities, creating ciphers that resisted solutions for decades. However, his specialized intelligence appeared narrower than Dexter's comprehensive cognitive abilities, and his communications provided numerous investigative clues. The crucial difference between Dexter and real serial killers lies in emotional regulation. While real killers like Bundy, Rader, and Zodiac succumb to psychological pressures, ego, sexual compulsion, or recognition needs, Dexter maintained clinical detachment. His intelligence was enhanced by emotional deficits that eliminated vulnerabilities, destroying other high IQ killers. With all that in mind, where does Dexter's intelligence lie? Based on Dexter Morgan's demonstrated abilities across multiple cognitive domains, his IQ likely falls within the 130 to 140 range, placing him in the gifted to highly gifted category. This estimation synthesizes evidence from his academic achievements, strategic planning, emotional manipulation, adaptability, and learning capacity to provide a comprehensive intelligence assessment. Standard IQ ranges provide context for this estimation. Average intelligence spans 85 to 115, with 100 representing the population mean. The 115 to 129 range indicates above average intelligence, while 130 to 144 represents gifted ability found in roughly 2% of the population. Dexter's capabilities consistently exceed above average performance, demonstrating the systematic thinking and complex problem-solving characteristic of gifted individuals. His academic excellence supports this range. Graduating top of his medical school class and mastering forensic science requires exceptional intellectual ability. Medical school admission alone demands IQ scores typically above 115, while achieving top ranks suggests capabilities well into the gifted range. His comprehensive knowledge, spanning multiple disciplines, indicates the intellectual breadth associated with higher cognitive ability. Dexter's strategic planning and methodical thinking demonstrates the executive functioning and working memory capacity characteristic of high IQ individuals. His ability to maintain complex long-term operations while juggling multiple identities requires cognitive resources typically found in the 130+ range. His systematic approach to problem-solving and continuous self-improvement reflects the metacognitive awareness associated with gifted intelligence. However, IQ testing limitations must be considered. Traditional tests may not capture the specialized intelligence of psychopathic individuals, whose cognitive profiles differ from typical populations. Dexter's emotional deficits might actually enhance performance on certain IQ subtests by eliminating anxiety and emotional interference that typically impair test performance. Comparing Dexter to fictional genius characters provides additional perspective. Unlike stereotypical evil masterminds with implausibly high IQs, Dexter's 130 to 140 estimation reflects realistic gifted intelligence applied with exceptional focus and emotional detachment. This 130 to 140 range accounts for his demonstrated abilities while remaining within documented parameters for high-functioning individuals, making Dexter's intelligence both dramatically compelling and psychologically plausible. So he was smarter than Bundy, with the emotional control of a beast. If you got on his wrong side, you might find yourself deep in the Bay Harbor. Next up, we have the 7 levels of Dexter's kills. From parking lot executions to international manhunts that cross continents, some kills took 30 seconds of planning, others required Dexter to confront the darkest truths about his own existence and everything Harry taught him. This is the ranking of Dexter's kills by pure insanity and complexity, starting from the most basic and building to the absolutely unhinged. Starting with level 1, the boxing ring setup. Benito Gomez represented the purest form of Dexter's methodology. Simple research, clean capture, efficient kill. Gomez was a former boxer who beat 2 people to death with his bare fist. His first victim was his girlfriend, beaten so badly that dental records were needed for identification. After serving 5 years, he murdered again, this time a father of 2, with such force that the victim's cheekbone shattered and his eyeball was pushed completely out of its socket. One of the man's sons witnessed the entire attack. Detective Joey Quinn arrested Gomez in Season 4, Episode 1. The case seemed airtight until Dexter brought the wrong evidence to court while exhausted from new fatherhood. The prosecution's case fell apart. Dexter fixed his mistake the old-fashioned way. He dragged Gomez to the boxing gym where he trained, injected him with M99, set up a kill room right there in the ring where Gomez had perfected his punches. No improvisation, no variables spinning out of control, just the code working exactly as Harry designed it. Even the simplest kills carry risk when exhaustion clouds judgment and memory fails completely. After the kill, Dexter loaded the dismembered body into garbage bags. While driving home, sleep deprivation from caring for baby Harrison caught up with him. Dexter fell asleep at the wheel and crashed. He woke up surrounded by paramedics with a concussion. At the impound yard, he found his kill tools but zero trace of the bags. For an entire episode, Dexter tore Miami apart looking for those remains. The amnesia from his concussion made Dexter forget he actually stashed the body parts back at the boxing arena before even getting into his car. The crash had nothing to do with the disposal. His exhausted, injured brain couldn't remember. A level 1 kill became a nightmare because one variable changed: sleep deprivation. That's all it took to nearly expose 20 years of work. This was level 1. The kill itself was paint by numbers: inject, kill, dismember. This was Dexter operating on autopilot, which ironically became the problem. But even if autopilot kills create consequences, What happens when Dexter stops hunting strangers and starts hunting the man who murdered his mother? Santos Jimenez forced Dexter to kill for pure vengeance, abandoning the code entirely to settle a debt 30 years in the making. In Season 2, Episode 5, Dexter learned the truth about his mother, Laura Moser's death. She had been working as Harry Morgan's confidential informant against drug lord Hector Estrada's organization. Santos Jimenez, one of Estrada's enforcers, was a man who actually wielded the chainsaw that killed Laura in front of 3-year-old Dexter and his brother Brian in that shipping container. Jimenez has turned state's evidence and entered witness protection. 34 years later, he was running a tavern called The Swamp in Naples, Florida, still dealing cocaine on the side. This kill violated everything Harry taught. Jimenez had already paid for his crimes through the legal system. He wasn't actively killing. Dexter stalked him purely for revenge. After confronting Jimenez at the bar and beating him, Dexter left. Then, Jimenez tried to ambush Dexter in a bowling alley parking lot with a knife. Lila West had given Jimenez's Dexter's location. Dexter's bowling teammates intervened and Jimenez escaped. Dexter hunted Jimenez to a remote cabin and killed him with a chainsaw, the same weapon Jimenez used to murder Laura Moser. In Season 2, Episode 8, Dexter tracked Jimenez to his cabin in the Everglades. He lured Jimenez outside by turning on music in his truck. When Jimenez investigated, Dexter injected him with M99. Inside the cabin, Dexter strapped Jimenez to a table and duct taped his mouth shut. Then he fired up a chainsaw and killed him the exact same way Jimenez had killed his mother. This wasn't justice. Call it what it was. Symmetry. Pure revenge. Dexter couldn't resist the poetic brutality of using Jimenez's own method against him. The chainsaw made it personal, made it revenge. Harry would have been horrified, but Dexter needed this kill to process his trauma. Later, Dexter discovered the note in Jimenez's wallet showing Lila had betrayed him, leading to their eventual confrontation. This was level 2. More complex than Gomez because it required Dexter to consciously violate the code. The execution was brutal and emotionally driven. This was the moment that Dexter proved that he could kill for reasons beyond Harry's rules when his past demanded it. So Dexter just killed for revenge. That's a line crossed. But what happens when the kill itself becomes a chess game with psychological warfare? Oliver Saxon operated in plain sight as Dexter's neighbor's boyfriend while secretly being the brain surgeon, forcing Dexter into a months-long game of cat and mouse. Season 8 introduced the brain surgeon, a serial killer who removed sections of victims' brains and left them as messages. The killer was later revealed to be Oliver Saxon, real name Daniel Vogel, the estranged son of Dr. Evelyn Vogel, who had helped create Harry's code. Saxon had killed his own brother as a child, escaped from a psychiatric hospital by setting a fire to fake his death, and left a long body count across multiple countries. In Miami, he killed Dexter's neighbor, Cassie Jolenstone, by bludgeoning her with a statue. He killed Dexter's prodigy, Zach Hamilton, by cutting open the back of his skull with a bone saw while Zach was still alive. Saxon dated Cassie specifically to get close to Dexter. He killed her and framed Zach to draw Dexter deeper into his web. When Saxon's identity was revealed, he slit his own mother, Evelyn Vogel's throat right in front of Dexter. Then, Saxon went after Deborah. He shot her during an arrest attempt. Deborah survived the gunshot, but suffered a stroke during surgery that left her brain dead. Dexter murdered Saxon inside Miami Metro Police Station holding cells by stabbing him in the neck with a pin, staging it as self-defense. After Saxon was arrested, Dexter visited him in the holding cell. During their confrontation, Dexter provoked Saxon into attacking him. When Saxon lunged, Dexter grabbed a pin and stabbed him directly in the neck, killing him. Quinn and Batista reviewed the security footage and ruled it as self-defense, and Dexter walked free. This was the only time that Dexter had killed a main antagonist in direct combat inside a police station. The audacity of murdering someone in custody, on camera, while surrounded by colleagues, required perfect execution. One wrong move, and the footage would have shown premeditated murder. Dexter had to make Saxon attack first, make it look defensive, and ensure that the pin strike was instantly fatal. The complexity came from the location and the stakes. This was level 3. Saxon's kill requires psychological manipulation, perfect timing, and performing a murder inside a police station on camera while making it look like self-defense. The months of infiltration and Saxon's connection to Vogel elevated this beyond a standard execution. Before you subscribe, let me ask you this. What happens when Dexter doesn't pull the trigger himself, but creates the circumstances that leads to someone else's death? James Dokes became the first person to catch Dexter in the act, forcing Dexter to imprison him in a cabin while deciding whether to kill an innocent man or turn himself in. Throughout Season 2, Sergeant Dokes stalked Dexter relentlessly. In Episode 9, Dokes followed Dexter to a remote cabin in the Everglades where Dexter had just killed Santos Jimenez. Dokes caught Dexter disposing of the body. Dexter subdued Dokes and locked him in a makeshift cage inside the cabin. For days, Dexter brought him food and water while internally debating his options. kill Dokes and violate the code by murdering an innocent man, or confess everything and go to prison. This was Dexter's greatest moral crisis. Dokes wasn't a killer. He was a decorated Army Ranger and a dedicated cop who simply figured out the truth. Dexter couldn't kill him without destroying everything Harry built. He couldn't let him go without destroying his own life. Dexter was paralyzed. Then Lila West found the cabin. Lila West discovered Dokes imprisoned in the cabin, learned from him that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher, and chose to kill Dokes by blowing up the cabin to protect Dexter. In the season 2 finale, Lila used Dexter's GPS to locate the cabin. She found Dokes caged and he told her everything. Lila, convinced Dexter was her soulmate, decided to help him. She turned on the gas stove, opened the propane tank valve, and locked Dokes inside. Dokes nearly freed himself but couldn't escape before the cabin exploded. His charred remains were found alongside Santos Jimenez's dismembered body. The FBI concluded that Dokes was the Bay Harbor Butcher who committed suicide to avoid capture. Lila solved Dexter's problem by making the decision for him. She murdered Dokes, framed him as the Butcher, and gave Dexter his freedom. Dexter later realized what happened when he found his GPS system in the cabin wreckage. This kill's complexity came from the moral weight. Dokes died because Dexter imprisoned him. Lila killed him, but Dexter created the circumstances. The case closed. Dokes was posthumously blamed for the Bay Harbor Butcher murders. His funeral was nearly empty, and Dexter had to live knowing that an innocent man died in his place. This was level 4. Dexter didn't execute this one, but his inaction caused it. The moral complexity of letting an innocent man die to protect his secret elevated this beyond any clean kill. Dokes' death shaped the entire series moving forward. One innocent man died. Now, imagine what happens when Dexter faces a killer who literally constructed a death maze and forces Dexter to run for his life. Ray Speltzer was the only killer who genuinely terrified Dexter by trapping him in a homemade maze and hunting him while wearing a bullhorn helmet. In Season 7, Speltzer was a paroled killer who had beaten 2 women to death. He constructed elaborate mazes inside foreclosed homes and stalked his victims through them while dressed as a minotaur. In Episode 3, Dexter tried to gather evidence on Speltzer, but the case fell apart. Speltzer walked free. That night, he killed Melanie Garrett in his maze. Deborah broke into the house and found Speltzer in full costume. He knocked her unconscious. Dexter arrived and saved Deborah, but Speltzer escaped. In Episode 4, Dexter broke into Speltzer's RV to plant evidence. Speltzer ambushed him. They fought, and despite Dexter's jiu-jitsu training, Speltzer's raw strength overpowered him. Speltzer knocked Dexter unconscious with a nearby object. When Dexter woke up, he was trapped in Speltzer's death mage. A message on the wall read, "Run." This was the first time that Dexter actually felt fear. Dexter escaped Speltzer's maze by going up instead of down, then hunted Speltzer to a cemetery and killed him in a crematorium. Speltzer's maze was designed to funnel victims downward into worse traps. Dexter realized this and climbed up and out through a window instead. He escaped before Speltzer could catch hhim. Later, Dexter stalked Speltzer to a mausoleum, where he kept his victims' belongings. Dexter sedated him at the cemetery, transported him to a crematorium, and set up a kill table. After the ritual, Dexter cremated Speltzer's body along with his entire box of blood slides. This kill ranks high because Dexter genuinely didn't know if he'd survive. Speltzer was physically stronger, had home field advantage, and had Dexter completely vulnerable. The psychological terror of waking up in that maze, knowing a killer was hunting you, made this one of Dexter's most dangerous encounters. Even after escaping, Dexter had to hunt Speltzer down with revenge driving him. This was level 5. Speltzer is the only antagonist who made Dexter run in fear. The physical confrontation in the RV, waking up trapped in the maze, and the creeping dread of being hunted elevated this kill through pure survival horror. Complexity came from Dexter being the prey before becoming the predator again. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're moving into territory where Dexter's kills start reshaping his entire existence. Arthur Mitchell was one of the most prolific serial killers in TV history, killing across dozens of cities for 3 decades while hiding in plain sight as a devoted family man and church deacon. Season 4 introduced Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. FBI agent Frank Lundy had tracked him for years. Arthur's kill cycle consisted of 4 murders. First, he kidnapped a 10-year-old boy, dressed him in pajamas, and made him play with trains, then bury him alive in wet cement at a 4 walls, 1 heart construction site. Second, he sliced a young woman's femoral artery in a bathtub. Third, he'd force a mother of 2 to jump to her death from a building. Fourth, he'd bludgeon a father of 2 with a framing hammer. Each murder represented a member of Arthur's family who died when he was 10. Dexter infiltrated Arthur's life using the alias Kyle Butler. He attended Arthur's church, helped build houses, even spent Thanksgiving with Arthur's family. Dexter admired how Arthur balanced his double life. Then Dexter saw the truth. Behind closed doors, Arthur terrorized his wife Sally and abused his children Rebecca and Jonah. Arthur was a monster wearing a mask of righteousness. Dexter killed Arthur with a framing hammer in a kidnapping room, but Arthur had already murdered Rita before Dexter could stop him. In the season 4 finale, Dexter tracked Arthur to a house where he was holding a kidnapped boy. Dexter saved the child and confronted Arthur. Arthur told Dexter that they were the same, said it's already over, predicting that Dexter would end up just like him. Dexter bludgeoned Arthur to death with a framing hammer, the same weapon that Arthur used on his victims. When Dexter arrived home, he found Rita dead in the bathtub with her femoral artery sliced. Baby Harrison was sitting in her blood. Arthur had killed Rita before Dexter killed him. This kill shattered Dexter's world. He spent months studying Arthur to learn how to balance family and killing. Instead, Arthur proved that balance was impossible. The final cost came when Arthur murdered Rita as his last act of revenge. Dexter killed the Trinity Killer, but Trinity won. Harrison grew up in blood just like Dexter. The trauma passed to the next generation. This kill's complexity came from its aftermath. Everything changed. Dexter lost Rita, Harrison lost his mother, and Dexter proved that he couldn't protect the people he loved while living his double life. So this is level 6. Arthur Mitchell's 30-year killing career, his elaborate 4-stage cycle, his complete mastery of deception, and his final devastating move of killing Rita before dying elevated this to near maximum complexity. Dexter killed Trinity. Trinity destroyed Dexter's family. That's a level of psychological warfare that no other antagonist achieved. And now we get to the absolute peak. The kill that forced Dexter to choose between his brother and his sister, between his true self and the life that Harry built. Welcome to level 7. Brian Moser spent season 1 leaving cryptic messages and dismembered bloodless bodies across Miami specifically designed to awaken Dexter's memories of their shared trauma. The ice truck killer murdered prostitutes, drained their blood, dismembered their bodies, and left them in public locations. He sent Dexter a severed head in the mail, left a dismembered doll in Dexter's freezer, created a crime scene using mannequins arranged exactly like the Morgan's family photo. Every clue was tailored for Dexter. In the season 1 finale, the kidnapper kidnapped Deborah. Dexter followed the trail to their childhood home. The killer removed his mask. Rudy Cooper, Deborah's boyfriend, real name Brian Moser, Dexter's biological brother. Brian witnessed Laura Moser's murder alongside Dexter in that shipping container, but Harry only adopted Dexter. Brian was sent to a psychiatric hospital. He grew up alone, developing the same psychopathic urges without any code to control them. Brian became a killer who murdered indiscriminately. When he was released at age 21, he tracked down his brother, dated Deborah to get close, left clues to jog Dexter's memory, all to reunite and kill together. Brian kidnapped Deborah and gave Dexter an ultimatum: kill Deborah and embrace his true nature, or save her and deny his biological brother forever. Brian took Deborah to the house to where their mother died. He strapped her to a table wrapped in plastic, ready to kill her. When Dexter arrived, Brian revealed everything. They were brothers. They'd been through the same trauma. Harry had abandoned Brian to save Dexter. Now, they could finally be freed together. All Dexter had to do was let Deborah die. Brian believed that Dexter would choose blood over adoption, choosing truth over the lie that Harry constructed, but Dexter proved Brian wrong. He freed Deborah and saved her. Brian then tried to kill her anyways, and Dexter stopped him. Later, Brian broke into Dexter's apartment expecting to find Deborah. Instead, Dexter had set a trap. He strangled Brian unconscious with a garrote, transported him to Brian's refrigeration unit, suspended him upside down exactly like Brian did to his victims, and they had one final conversation. Brian begged Dexter not to kill him, said they belonged together. Dexter, crying, told Brian he was sorry. He then slit Brian's throat with a knife, let him bleed out, staged it as a suicide, and walked away from his last living blood relative. This is the most complex kill in Dexter's history, less about planning or technique, more about what it represented. Dexter had to murder his own brother to protect his sister, who wasn't related by blood. He had to choose Harry's code over his true nature, had to kill the only person who completely understood what he'd been through. Brian was Dexter without the code. Killing him was killing part of himself. That emotional complexity, that impossible choice, that permanent severing of his past, makes this the apex of Dexter's kills. Level 7, the brother's betrayal. Dexter's kills range from textbook demonstrations of the code to complete chaos that violated every rule that Harry ever taught. The simplest one required one injection and one knife. The most complex demanded sacrificing family, destroying innocence, and choosing between competing versions of himself. Benito Gomez died in a boxing ring after straightforward stalking. Santos Jimenez died for revenge with a chainsaw. Oliver Saxon died in a police station on camera. Lila West killed James Dokes to protect Dexter from his own moral paralysis. Ray Speltzer hunted Dexter through a death maze before dying in a crematorium. Arthur Mitchell murdered Rita even after Dexter killed him with a hammer. And Brian Moser forced Dexter to choose between brother and sister, between truth and the lie that Harry built. The pattern is clear. The more variables Dexter controlled, the simpler the kill. The more chaos entered the equation, the more insane things became. In the end, what defined his kills was how far he'd go when everything fell apart. Not the precision, it was desperation. And now, why Dexter refused to kill. Dexter was a man who had an uncontrollable desire to kill, yet Harry's code restrained him to only kill other killers who had escaped the justice system. Whilst he came close several times, Dexter spared the lives of 6 people because they did not fit the code. The first person Dexter chose not to kill was Paul Bennett, Rita's abusive ex-husband. Paul was a wicked man who had served 18 months in prison for assaulting and abusing his wife, Rita. He was troubled, drawn to the idea of having a family and children, and ultimately proving why some people deserve neither. When Paul was released from prison due to overcrowding, Rita was devastated, knowing her life would once again be filled with his harassment and toxicity. One of Paul's first actions after leaving prison was to pick up Cody and Aster from school without informing Rita, leaving her furious and reaffirming her desire to keep him out of their lives. When he met Dexter, Paul was immediately confrontational and aggressive, revealing himself as a threat to the family's stability. Soon after, Paul escalated things with Dexter, questioning his involvement with Rita and continuing to provoke him.
Is that it?
Things took a darker turn when Paul showed up one afternoon, drunk, and attempted to assault Rita again. She was forced to defend herself with a baseball bat, desperate to keep him at bay. Yet despite the clear threat he posed, Paul managed to escape any legal consequences due to the loopholes in the system, leaving Rita feel powerless and unprotected. It all came to a head when Paul barged into Dexter and Rita's kitchen, verbally insulting and antagonizing Rita once again. This time, however, Paul got the reaction he wanted. Dexter's temper flared, and in a rare moment of impulse, he struck Paul with a frying pan, knocking him unconscious. In that moment, Dexter considered killing Paul to permanently rid Rita's life of his toxic presence. However, despite his hatred and disdain for Paul, Dexter ultimately chose to spare him, as Paul did not fit Harry's code. However, this didn't mean that Dexter was just going to let Paul go without consequences. Dexter took Paul's unconscious body back to his motel and injected him with to make him look like he had relapsed. This manipulation sent Paul back to prison, effectively removing him from Rita's life without violating the code. However, Dexter's actions had unforeseen consequences. While in prison, Paul realized Dexter had set him up and tried to warn Rita, but she dismissed his claims, choosing to trust Dexter over Paul's accusations. Paul later died in prison during a violent altercation, an outcome indirectly resulting from Dexter's decision. Me personally, I wish Dexter would have killed him himself, but I was still glad to see Paul gone for good. And if you were too, make sure to subscribe. This incident was one of the first times Dexter's actions led to a tragic outcome. It showed the blurred lines in his sense of morality and hinted at how personal attachments could make it harder for him to follow the code. The next person Dexter almost killed but ultimately chose to spare was Jeremy Downs, a troubled young man who had killed his rapist at the age of 15, resulting in him serving 4 years in juvenile detention. Upon Jeremy's release, Dexter took an immediate interest in him, eager to determine if he had the traits of a killer or was someone who needed to be permanently removed from society. Dexter suspected that Jeremy, like himself, might have a compulsion to kill. His suspicions seemed confirmed when he followed Jeremy to a marketplace and saw him buying a knife and recklessly swinging it around in public.
Easy, kid.
As Dexter continued to stalk him, he saw Jeremy lure a young man into a secluded area under the pretense of watching alligators. The setting and approach mirrored Jeremy's first killing, and after Dexter saw Jeremy draw for his knife, he knew he was going to strike again. Dexter intervened, stopping what he saw as an inevitable repeat of history, and the two boys quickly scrambled away. For Dexter, this confirmed that Jeremy met the criteria of Harry's code. Later that night, Dexter confronted Jeremy alone in the halfway house, intending to kill him to prevent further harm. However, Jeremy revealed that his first killing had been in self-defense.
You're mine now.
What do you want?
Silence.
You gonna fuck me because I killed the last guy who raped me?
This confession completely changed Dexter's perspective, making him realize that Jeremy was a traumatized young man, not a monster deserving punishment. Little did he know how wrong he could be. Instead of killing Jeremy, Dexter advised him to control his violent urges, suggesting he should only harm those who deserve it if he couldn't resist. However, despite this chance at redemption, Jeremy's violent tendencies resurfaced, and he killed again, eventually leading to his arrest by Sergeant Dokes. In a final encounter while in custody, Jeremy confessed to Dexter that he felt empty inside, and killed to try to feel something. Unable to find peace, Jeremy ultimately took his own life in a way similar to how he killed his victims. Jeremy's tragic end had a profound impact on Dexter, revealing the dangers of showing mercy outside of Harry's code. By sparing Jeremy, Dexter had unintentionally allowed him to kill again, and his mercy ultimately proved futile when Jeremy took his own life. The next person was a similar story. Dexter's decision not to kill Sergeant James Dokes presented one of the greatest moral dilemmas in the show. Dokes had a sharp instinct for danger, and from the beginning, he sensed that something was off about Dexter. Eventually, Dokes discovered that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher, even catching him in the act. However, his attempt to bring Dexter to justice failed, and he ended up captured and locked in a cage, unable to expose Dexter's dark secret. Dexter faced a difficult choice. He could kill Dokes and protect his secret, violating Harry's code, or he could turn himself in and spare Dokes' life. This internal battle intensified as Dexter contemplated turning himself in rather than compromising his moral guidelines. However, Dexter found a third option: frame Dokes and let Miami Metro do the rest. He planted evidence that would lead others to conclude that Dokes, not Dexter, was the serial killer. This choice allowed Dexter to both keep his secret intact and spare Dokes' life, as no one would believe Dokes once he was caught. The situation took a dark turn when Dexter's ex-girlfriend, Lila, discovered Dokes locked in the cabin.
Poor thing, all alone.
I'm okay. Just open the gate.
Not you. Dexter.
Believing she was helping Dexter, she killed Dokes by setting the cabin on fire, ending his life. Though Dexter hadn't intended Dokes' death, it cast a dark shadow over his actions, reminding him of the serious consequences of even indirect choices. While Dokes' death protected Dexter's secret, it also haunted him, revealing the risk of manipulating others' lives. Dokes was one of my favorite characters, so I was very annoyed when he died. Speaking of, who is your favorite character? Comment down below. Dexter's choice to not help Miguel kill Alan Wolfe showed his strong commitment to Harry's code, and increasing the tension between the two. Ellen, a determined defense attorney, was known for defending clients with shady backgrounds and often helping them avoid conviction. There's always been tension between the two, as she accused Miguel of using unethical tactics like hiding evidence, intimidating witnesses, and tampering with juries. To Miguel, she was a blood-sucking, soulless enabler who let killers walk free.
Real reason she's blindfolded, so she doesn't have to watch everything she stands for get pissed on by someone like Ellen Wolfe.
Miguel's disdain for Ellen intensified after her client, Albert Chung, killed a young college student and walked free, and he urged Dexter to view her as a legitimate target. Initially, Dexter considered the idea, wondering if Ellen's actions might indirectly put others at risk, which could, in a twisted way, make her fit the code.
You look the time.
Do I see sheets of plastic in your future?
However, as he observed her more closely, Dexter concluded that she did not fit the code's criteria. She was not a killer and had not directly harmed innocents. She was simply just doing her job. Dexter's decision to spare Ellen highlighted his commitment to the ethical boundaries of his code, even as Miguel pressured him to kill her for personal reasons. Dexter saw that Miguel's anger towards Ellen was driven by ego and resentment, not a pursuit of justice. However, despite Dexter's choice, Miguel took matters into his own hands, killing Ellen in a violent, impulsive act and burying her in an unmarked grave. Ellen's murder marked a turning point for Dexter, exposing Miguel's lack of restraint and his disregard for any moral code. It showed Dexter that his restraint had been in vain, and underscored the risk of comprising his own ethics, ultimately reinforcing his commitment to strictly follow Harry's code. I mentioned this in the previous video, but isn't it strange how everyone Dexter chooses to spare ends up dead anyways? But the next person would be the first person to actually survive. Dexter's decision not to kill Ramon Prado, even after Ramon went on a reckless spree, demonstrated Dexter's restraint and his ability to feel empathy, even towards someone who had posed a potential threat. Ramon, a lieutenant sheriff and the hot-headed middle brother of the Prado family, was consumed by grief and anger after the deaths of his brother, Oscar and Miguel, both of whom had fallen victim to Dexter's darkness. This trauma drove Ramon into a downward spiral of rage and alcoholism, causing him to lash out at those around him, including Dexter, whom he had suspected was involved in his family's tragedies. Although Ramon was correct in his suspicions, his behavior that followed was completely irrational. In his grief, Ramon became increasingly erratic, following and intimidating Dexter, and in a shocking turn of events, even pulling a gun on him at his wedding rehearsal.
I should put a bullet in your head. In front of everybody. So they can see what it's like to lose someone.
Which ultimately led to his arrest. To Dexter, Ramon initially seemed like a dangerous, wounded animal, a ticking time bomb ready to explode at any moment. His dark passenger urged him to eliminate Ramon, not only to protect himself, but also to end Ramon's suffering. Yet, Dexter showed restraint. Instead of viewing Ramon as a true threat, Dexter began to see him as a man consumed by emotions he couldn't manage. Ramon wasn't a killer. He was a grieving brother struggling to make sense of his world. Dexter recognized that Ramon's aggression was a symptom of his pain, not a real danger to him. Choosing not to kill Ramon, Dexter instead confronted him in jail, talking him through his rage and encouraging him to face his darkness. Their conversation helped Ramon face his own demons, revealing that his anger stemmed from a lifetime in Miguel's shadow. With Miguel gone, Ramon realized he needed to let go of his destructive behavior for the sake of his own children. For Dexter, this decision underscored the idea that not every threat needs to be met with violence. Some could be solved with compassion and empathy. Moving on to the final person of this video, Dexter's choice to spare Lumen was a turning point, showing his empathy and sense of justice even within the strict limits of his code. When Dexter killed Boyd Fowler, he wasn't alone. Lumen, one of Boyd's recent captives, had witnessed the act from a doorway. Terrified, she tried to escape, but Dexter quickly intercepted her. Initially, he saw her as a liability, a loose end who could expose his secret, and for a moment, he even considered killing her to protect himself. Lumen didn't fit the code. She hadn't harmed innocents and was a victim herself. Instead of eliminating her, Dexter took a gamble, trusting that she would stay silent. In an unusual act of compassion, he even tended to her wounds and nursed her back to health, showing a rare willingness to let someone else into his guarded world. Over time, Dexter's decision to spare Lumen had a deep impact on him. Driven by a strong need for justice against the men who had brutalized her, Lumen's sense of vengeance resonated with Dexter, who was haunted by his failure to save his late wife, Rita, from a similar fate. The two became allies, hunting down and killing the remaining members of the Barrel Girl gang. Through this partnership, Dexter opened up emotionally in ways he had never before, finding someone who truly understood and shared his darkness for deeply personal reasons. Lumen saw every side of Dexter and accepted him completely, and their bond grew so strong that they eventually became lovers. This relationship marked a major shift in Dexter's character. Instead of seeing himself as a lone, unchangeable force, he began to act from a rare place of emotion. Working with Lumen, Dexter realized that his darkness could serve a greater moral purpose, especially as he struggled with regret over failing to protect Rita. By sparing Lumen and supporting her quest for justice, Dexter took his first step towards compassion. This choice, once a risky gamble, ultimately brought him closer to his own humanity and became one of the most transformative moments of his life. Next up, the 9 levels of Dexter's kill ritual. Dexter Morgan killed 149 people, and whenever possible, he followed a precise ritual to carry out each murder in almost exactly the same way. This video breaks down the 9 steps of his kill ritual. Dexter's ritual always began with picking a victim, a careful choice grounded in his twisted sense of justice. Guided by Harry's code, Dexter only selected people who had killed others and escaped the justice system. This rule helped Dexter rationalize his actions as a form of vigilante justice. As a forensic blood splatter analyst at Miami Metro, Dexter had access to cases where suspects had either escaped conviction or remain unidentified, giving him leads on potential targets who meet his criteria. Whilst he didn't follow this strictly, formally this was part of his ritual. For instance, in Season 1, Dexter set his sights on Mike Donovan, a man responsible for killing several young boys. Through his work, Dexter uncovered Donovan's crimes, and after confirming he was an escaped killer, deemed him a worthy target. Another example was Jorge Castillo, a human trafficker whose actions led to the deaths of multiple women. Dexter meticulously verified Castillo's guilt, gathering undeniable evidence that justified Castillo as his next victim. This process of selecting only those who had harmed others was essential to Dexter's sense of identity. By choosing targets he believed deserved to die, Dexter convinced himself he was doing society a favor, protecting the innocent from those who escaped justice. Unlike a typical serial killer driven by impulse urges, Dexter operated with a structured, if twisted, purpose, allowing him to see himself not just as a predator, but a protector. Do you think Dexter really believed this? Or did he just say this to justify his violence? Comment down below. The next step was even more important. The stalking phase was a crucial part of his ritual, giving him a chance to confirm his selected victim and learn routines and plan the capture. Dexter approached this phase with the same care he brought to his forensic work, learning their habits, vulnerabilities, and movements until he knew them intimately. By studying these patterns, Dexter identified the best time and place to strike, ensuring he could act without being seen. For example, in Season 7, Dexter initially stalked Phil Bosso, suspecting him of being the phantom arsonist and a potential fit for his code. However, he later discovered that Bosso had a solid alibi and couldn't be responsible for the murders, meaning Dexter couldn't kill him. This demonstrates how critical Dexter's stalking phase is in ensuring his targets meet the strict criteria of the code. Stalking allowed Dexter to collect concrete evidence. He didn't act on hearsay or rumors. He acted on solid proof that met the code of Harry. This phase again reassured Dexter that he wasn't just following an impulse, but fulfilling a purpose. By gathering hard evidence through surveillance, photos, and recordings, he built a case that reinforced his twisted sense of justice. Which brings me onto the next step, confirming the code. Confirming the code was Dexter's final checkpoint, a moment where, after selecting and stalking his target, he ensured they truly deserved to die. Guided by Harry's code, Dexter sought undeniable proof that his target was a killer who posed an ongoing threat. This phase allowed Dexter to rationalize his actions, making him feel as if he was administering justice, again, not just killing for killing's sake. In Season 1, for example, Dexter targeted Jamie Jaworski, a cemetery worker and murderer who abused women and filmed them to relive their deaths. Before taking action, Dexter confirmed Jaworski's guilt by finding video evidence of his crimes. This proof gave Dexter the confidence to proceed, seeing his actions as justified. This confirmation phase gave Dexter a sense of control and purpose. It was crucial to his ritual, allowing him to move forward without remorse, now convinced that his targets were deserving. The next step is where we get onto the good stuff. After confirming his target's guilt, Dexter's next step was always the methodical preparation of his kill room, his signature. Each kill room was a carefully prepared space, covered entirely in plastic to keep blood and evidence contained, allowing Dexter to carry out his ritual with complete control. Dexter often chose places his victims knew well, such as their homes, offices, or other personal spaces, adding a personal touch to their deaths. The way he set up the kill room allowed him to complete his actual ritual without interruption, but we'll get onto that later. An example of when Dexter did this was in Season 4, when Dexter converted Zoe Kruger's home into a kill room, intensifying the impact by using her own surroundings to confront her with the innocence she had destroyed. Setting up the kill room this way was key to Dexter's success as a serial killer. It made it highly unlikely he'd get caught, allowing him to make people disappear without a trace. But again, we'll get onto that later. Next step is capturing the target. Once he confirmed the target's guilt according to his code and meticulously prepared the kill room, Dexter moved on to the ambush, where timing and precision were essential. Relying on insights gained during his stalking phase, he would select the perfect time and place to strike, ensuring his target was isolated and vulnerable. To subdue his victim, Dexter employed either a sleeper hold or injected M99 tranquilizer directly into the neck, each technique designed to cause immediate unconsciousness. With the target subdued, Dexter transported them to the prepared kill room, where he stripped them of their clothing and secured them tightly to a table using shrink wrap, duct tape, or belts. In Season 3, Dexter found himself at odds with Miguel Prado, a friend turned foe after Dexter discovered Miguel's chilling plan to kill Maria La Huerta. To stay one step ahead, Dexter carefully tracked Miguel's movements, fully aware of his impulsive nature, and crafted a plan to lure Miguel into making a fatal mistake. Miguel took the bait and went to Maria's house, where Dexter swiftly ambushed him and tranquilized him. This example highlights Dexter's reliance on timing, precision, and adaptability to ensure each ambush is successful, setting the stage for his ritual without complications. On the occasion he was unsuccessful in capturing targets like Ray Speltzer or Arthur Mitchell, his life became significantly more complicated. Capturing the target requires Dexter to synthesize every detail he had gathered, their routines, vulnerabilities, and personality traits. It was a final test of his patience and discipline, where even a slight miscalculation could be disastrous. Once Dexter finally got his targets wrapped in plastic, he could move on to his favorite part of the kill ritual. But before I get into that, I just want to remind you to subscribe if you enjoy the content. The most personal part of Dexter's ritual was collecting a trophy, a single drop of blood from each victim. After capturing his target and bringing them to the kill room, Dexter took a blood sample from their cheek and placed it on a glass slide. Each slide became a trophy, symbolizing justice as he saw it and serving as a reminder of his twisted accomplishments. At the end of Season 4, after finally catching Arthur Mitchell, Dexter took his blood sample, marking the end of a long, intense pursuit of one of his most dangerous targets. Each slide represents a victory over someone who, in his eyes, deserved justice. These blood slides were Dexter's way of cataloging his dark achievements, the collection serving as a visual archive of his work. For Dexter, taking a blood trophy was essential. It was proof of his work and a token of justice he believed he was delivering. After he took their blood sample, the real ritual began. Dexter's kill ritual involved a powerful psychological confrontation, where he forced his victims to face the reality of their crimes. For example, in Season 1, when Dexter captured Emmett Meridian, a therapist who drove his patients to suicide, he laid out photographs of Meridian's victims, stripping away his facade of innocence. This tactic intimidated and reinforced Dexter's justification for the kill. Before killing his victims, Dexter would confront them, revealing personal details about his life, secrets he could only share with them, knowing that they would never be able to tell anyone. When Dexter confronted Jimenez, the man who murdered his mother, he reminded him of his brutal past and the life-altering pain he inflicted.
Normally I'd have a chat to make sure you understand why you're here, but I think you have a pretty good idea.
By doing so, Dexter relished not only in Jimenez's fear, but also in his own sense of justice and closure. Dexter would also emphasize the good he is doing. In Season 8, when Dexter captured Saxon, a serial killer targeting those close to Dexter, he intimidated Saxon by detailing how he would never hurt anyone again.
Oh no, you're still gonna die. Just gonna be in the electric chair.
In this confrontation, Dexter took satisfaction in the fact that Saxon was now powerless, reversing their roles from predator and prey. Through these confrontations, Dexter asserted his dominance, ensuring his victims faced both the terror and helplessness they had inflicted on others. Dexter ended the lives of those on his table by stabbing them, often using a weapon symbolic of their crimes, and he took immense pleasure in the act. But he made sure he left no trace. Which brings us to the next step, leaving no evidence. Once the kill was complete, Dexter moved on to dismembering the body, a grim but essential step in his ritual to make sure he left no evidence. He approached this with the same care he put into every phase, cutting up the body to make it easier to dispose of without a trace. After dismembering the body, Dexter scrubbed the kill room clean, removing every trace that could connect him to the crime. This phase was about complete erasure, from bloodstains to stray hairs, so that no one could ever trace the kill back to him. In Season 1, after killing Matt Chambers, a repeat offender who had escaped justice for multiple hit-and-run incidents, Dexter carefully dismembered the body, wrapping each piece in plastic to contain any evidence. He meticulously examined the room, wiping down every surface and corner to eliminate any stray blood or fibers, and then, confident in his cleanup, he departed, leaving no sign that anyone had been there. He was careful because he knew that a single hair, fingerprint, or drop of blood could expose him, so he took no chances. After gathering all the remnants from the kill room, Dexter transported the wrapped body parts to his boat, which brings me to the final part of the ritual. The final step in Dexter's ritual was disposing of the remains at sea. After cleaning up the kill room and wrapping the body parts in plastic, Dexter took them out on his boat, the Slice of Life, to a deep, remote spot in the ocean, where he would then dump them overboard. Initially, Dexter didn't take his victims' remains far enough out to sea, and they were eventually found by divers, sparking the Bay Harbor butcher case. Learning from his mistake, he began disposing them much further out, ensuring the remains would be lost forever in his underwater graveyard in the middle of the ocean. This process allowed him to eliminate every trace of his victim, and it meant no one ever knew his victims were even dead. And that's why he was such a genius serial killer. As he dumped corpse after corpse into the ocean, Dexter felt a deep sense of peace and satisfaction. With each body, he believed that there was one less monster in the world, and his dark passenger was momentarily appeased. This perfect kill ritual allowed him to successfully kill 149 people during his lifetime. At last, we have every Dexter victim who deserved a second chance. From two drug smugglers who got caught in the wrong cabin, to a police sergeant whose only mistake was trusting the wrong man, these are the people Dexter Morgan never should have killed. Starting with Esteban and Tio Famosa. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation was closing in on Dexter, and he had done the unthinkable, kidnapped Sergeant James Dokes, the one cop who could see through his mask. Hidden away in a remote Everglades cabin, these mortal enemies were locked in a deadly stalemate that can only end with one of them dead. Dokes had discovered Dexter's blood slide collection and knew he was the Bay Harbor Butcher. Game over, right? Nope, not for Dexter. Instead of killing one man who could destroy him, he chose imprisonment, holding Dokes in Santos Jimenez's old drug cabin while desperately trying to figure out his next move. The cabin was a powder keg waiting to explode. Not only was it hiding a kidnapped police officer, but it still contained massive amounts of cocaine from Jimenez's operation. Every day Dexter delayed was another day closer to discovery, exposure, and the complete destruction of his carefully constructed life. Esteban and Teo Famosa had no idea that they were about to walk into hell. These Cuban drug smugglers arrived by airboat to collect Jimenez's leftover cocaine stash. Just another routine pickup for two career criminals trying to make a living. They weren't killers or psychopaths, just working men in a dangerous business. When Dokes managed to escape his makeshift prison, he was running blind through the swampland. Hearing the approaching airboat, he saw salvation and frantically waved from shore. These strangers would be his ticket to freedom and his chance to finally expose Dexter's crimes. But the moment Dokes identified himself as police, everything went to hell. The Famosa brothers didn't need perfect English to understand that cops meant trouble. They knocked Dokes unconscious and forced him at gunpoint to haul their cocaine to the boat. Dexter returned, expecting his controlled situation, and instead he found chaos. Two armed strangers were using his prisoner as slave labor, completely oblivious that they were threatening the one person who could end Dexter's world. What happened next was one of the most twisted moments in the series. Dexter Morgan and James Dokes, bitter enemies who had been trying to destroy each other for months, suddenly found themselves fighting side by side for their lives. Dexter signaled his presence while Dokes bought him time by arguing with Teo. Moving like the predator he was, Dexter slipped behind Esteban and snapped his neck. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the humid air. When Dexter emerged with Esteban's gun, Dokes read the situation perfectly. He grabbed a handful of cocaine and threw it directly into Teo's face, blinding him. Dexter didn't hesitate. One shot through the heart, and both brothers were dead. In the silence that followed, something unprecedented happened. Dokes, the man who had dedicated his life to stopping Dexter, actually thanked him for saving his life. For one brief moment, these mortal enemies acknowledged that they just survived hell together. But reality crashed back quickly. They had two bodies and a crime scene to clean up. Working with grim efficiency, they fed both corpses to the alligators, watching prehistoric predators erase all evidence of the Famosa brothers' existence. Crisis handled, the old dynamic returned. Dexter re-imprisoned Dokes and their deadly game resumed. But something had fundamentally changed in that cabin. The Famosa brothers marked Dexter's first kills without vetting. No research, no confirmation they were murderers, no careful planning, just survival instinct overriding Harry's code when everything was on the line. This shattered precedent would echo throughout every future violation. When Dexter later killed Oscar Prado, he claimed he'd never killed without vetting, conveniently forgetting the Famosa brothers. This selective amnesia revealed how easily Dexter rewrote his own history to maintain his righteous self-image. The Famosa brothers were just collecting drugs from a dead dealer. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong prisoner to threaten. But when his survival was at stake, Dexter's true nature emerged. He'd murder anyone standing between him and freedom. This moment in the swamp revealed the monster Harry's code was designed to contain, foreshadowing every moral compromise that would eventually destroy everything Dexter claimed to believe. You think this was Dexter's first real slip? We're just getting started. Hit that like button so we can keep digging into every time he broke the code and hope nobody noticed. Dexter had just killed two strangers without a second thought, but the real collapse began when he killed someone whose name he actually knew. Season 3 opened with Dexter hunting Fred Freebo Bowman, a drug dealer who killed two college girls but walked free thanks to a botched warrant. It was supposed to be another routine kill. Research the target target, confirm he deserved to die, execute justice. But sometimes the universe has other plans, and those plans don't care about Harry's code. Freebo was a piece of garbage who had murdered innocent college students and was laughing at the justice system from his crack house hideout. Dexter had done his homework, confirmed Freebo's guilt, and was ready to deliver the punishment Miami courts couldn't. It should have been textbook. Get in, kill the drug dealer, dispose of the body, go home to Rita. But Freebo's world was messier than Dexter anticipated. The drug trade doesn't operate in a vacuum, and there were other players with their own scores to settle. Unknown to Dexter, the Prado family had their own reasons for wanting Freebo dead, and Oscar Prado, the black sheep brother of Miami's power family, was already there when Dexter arrived. Oscar Prado was everything his successful brothers weren't. While Miguel climbed the ranks as an assistant district attorney and Ramon served as a respected sheriff, Oscar was a drug-addicted mess who owed money to dangerous people. He borrowed from Freebo and couldn't pay back, making him a liability in the dealer's eyes. When Dexter tracked Freebo to his hideout, he expected to find his target alone and vulnerable. Instead, he walked into a violent confrontation already in progress. Oscar was attacking Freebo with a bayonet, desperate and high, trying to settle his debt the only way he knew how, with violence. The timing couldn't have been worse. Dexter burst through the door just as Oscar had Freebo cornered, and his sudden appearance distracted Oscar for the crucial seconds Freebo needed. The drug dealer bolted, escaping through a back window, while Oscar was left holding a bloody weapon and staring at a stranger who just cost him his only chance at survival. What followed was pure chaos. Oscar, strung out and panicked, turned the bayonet towards Dexter. He had no idea who the stranger was or why he'd ruined everything, but he was beyond rational thinking. The drugs, the desperation, and the adrenaline had pushed him past the breaking point. Dexter found himself in a life or death struggle with a man he never researched, never confirmed as a killer, never intended to target. Oscar swung the bayonet wildly, and Dexter's training kicked in. Years of martial arts and carefully honed reflexes took over as he fought for his life. The struggle was brief but brutal. Dexter managed to gain control of the weapon, and what he would later claim was self-defense drove the bayonet deep into Oscar's chest. The blade pierced his heart, and Oscar's eyes went wide with shock and confusion. As life drained from his body, Oscar managed 3 words that would haunt Dexter for months. Who are you? It wasn't an accusation or a curse. It was a genuine question from a dying man who had no idea why his life was ending. Those 3 words hit Dexter like a physical blow. For the first time in his killing career, he was looking into the eyes of a victim who truly didn't deserve to die according to his code. Oscar was not a murderer who escaped justice. He was just an addict who made bad choices and ended up in the wrong place at the worst possible time. Dexter stood over the body, genuinely shaken. The man who killed dozens without feeling a flicker of emotion was suddenly asking himself the same question Oscar had asked. Who are you? Was he a righteous killer dispensing justice? Or was he just another murderer who found a way to justify his actions? For a moment, the carefully constructed walls around Dexter's psyche cracked. He had always told himself he was different, better than the killers he hunted. But standing over Oscar's corpse, where Freebo escaped and his mission failed, that distinction seemed meaningless. Let's be honest, Oscar Prado was attacking Dexter with a deadly weapon. Any reasonable person would call it self-defense. But here's the thing, Dexter had options that night. He could have tried to help Oscar, could have called for medical assistance, and could have shown mercy to a desperate addict. Instead, he made sure Oscar died, then convinced himself it was justified. That choice revealed everything about who Dexter really was beneath the code and the careful moral reasoning. When the push came to shove, he was a killer first and a philosopher second. Dexter kept insisting it was self-defense, but next time he wouldn't even have that excuse, and the fallout was far worse. Season 4 was supposed to be Dexter's perfect life. Married to Rita, playing suburban dad, balancing family with his dark passenger, but perfection made him sloppy, and when photographer Jonathan Farrow crossed his path, Dexter's assumptions would lead to his most devastating mistake yet. When model Estrella Carrazzo's severed arm was found inside an alligator, all roads led to Jonathan Farrow. This fashion photographer specialized in grotesque imagery that bordered on torture porn, women eating their own intestines, bruised faces presented as art, and violence disguised as creativity. His portfolio read like a serial killer's fantasy, making him the obvious suspect. Farrow had all the red flags Dexter looked for: a 2002 rape arrest in New York that mysteriously disappeared when the victim recanted, likely after being paid off, a history of roughing up his models for artistic contrast, and now a dead girl who had been brutally beaten in his studio before disappearing forever. Everything pointed to Farrow being another monster who slipped through the justice system's cracks, the kind of predator Harry's code was designed to eliminate. Dexter's investigation seemed to confirm every suspicion. Blood evidence in Farrow's studio proved Estrella had been beaten there. The photographer's casual admission that he roughed up models for his art showed a complete lack of remorse. When questioned by police, Farrow even had the audacity to hit on Deborah, telling her he could make her a star if she came to his studio. That comment sealed his fate. Nobody threatened Dexter's sister and lived to tell about it. Farrow's behavior during questioning was arrogant and dismissive. He treated the investigation like an inconvenience, showing no concern for a dead woman who worked for him. His attitude screamed guilt to everyone in the room, especially Dexter, who was already building the kill room in his mind. The Trinity Killer investigation was consuming Dexter's attention, but he couldn't let this obvious predator slip away while he chased Arthur Mitchell. Some kills couldn't wait, and Jonathan Farrow seemed like exactly the kind of monster who'd escalate if left unchecked. Dexter's first attempt to grab Farrow from a nightclub failed when Quinn showed up unexpectedly, but the second time, he got his man. Abducting Farrow from his home, Dexter transported him to the one place that seemed most appropriate, Farrow's own photography studio. The irony was perfect. The same place where Farrow had brutalized women for his twisted art would become the site of his execution. Dexter wrapped him in plastic, secured him to his own equipment, and prepared to deliver justice for Estrella Carrazzo. But something was wrong. Even faced with certain death, Farrow maintained his innocence with surprising conviction. "I never killed anyone," he insisted, explaining that he only beat his models to create artistic contrast between beauty and ugliness. His protests seemed genuine, but Dexter had made up his mind. Without hesitation, Dexter brought the cleaver down, severing Farrow's head in one clean stroke. The photographer's final moments were filled with confusion and terror, the look of a man who genuinely didn't understand while he was dying. The next morning brought devastating news. Angel Batista walked into the station with Timothy Brand, Farrow's assistant, in handcuffs. The evidence against Brand was overwhelming: security footage, DNA, and witness testimony. He was Estrella's real killer, and he had been hiding in plain sight while his boss took the blame. Dexter stood frozen as the truth crashed over him. For the first time in his killing career, he had murdered an innocent man. Not innocent in the sense of being a good person. Farrow was still a predator who abused women, don't get me wrong, but innocent of the specific crime that had earned him a death sentence. The realization was shattering. Dexter's entire identity was built on the premise that he only killed those who deserved it. He was supposed to be different from other murderers, guided by a moral code that prevented exactly this kind of mistake. But standing in the bullpen, watching Brand get processed for Estrella's murder, Dexter finally understood what he really was: just another killer who found a way to justify his actions. And he wasn't the only innocent man to die because of Dexter's arrogance. Subscribe if you're seeing the pattern and want more episodes that show how deep this rot really went. Farrow was a mistake that Dexter could barely process, but what he did next wasn't a mistake. It was rage. Pure human rage. Rita Morgan died because of Dexter's choices, and he knew it. The Trinity Killer had murdered his wife as final revenge, leaving Dexter alone with 3 children and grief so raw it threatened to destroy him. What happened in that remote bait shop revealed the monster beneath all his careful control. Season 5 opened with Dexter in complete emotional collapse. Rita's death had shattered his world, and he was fleeing Miami by sea, running from responsibilities he couldn't face. The man who controlled every aspect of his existence was drowning in emotions he didn't understand. Dexter had always believed he was incapable of genuine human emotion, but sitting in that blood-soaked bathroom, holding his infant son while Rita's body laid cooling, something fundamental broke inside of him. When his boat ran out of gas at a remote fueling station, Dexter encountered another customer having a bad day. Rankin was trying to get the bathroom key, growing frustrated when no staff appeared. He found the key himself and noticed Dexter watching him. "The hell you looking at?" Rankin snapped, embarrassed about taking the key without permission, and channeling that embarrassment into hostility. Dexter, still numb from Rita's death, was staring without really seeing. He wasn't planning anything, just existing in emotional shock. Following Rankin into the bathroom was instinctive, not predatory. Dexter was seeking human connection, any acknowledgement of his pain. In his broken state, he tried being vulnerable with a stranger. "My wife died this week," Dexter said. "It was my fault." It was the closest thing to a genuine confession he'd ever made. Rankin's response was devastating. "Well, I'm real sorry for your fucking loss, but your dead wife can suck my dick." This stranger had taken his most vulnerable moment and spat on Rita's memory. Dexter's reaction was instant and brutal. He grabbed a folding anchor and brought it down on Rankin's skull again and again, 10 times. Long after the man was dead, Dexter kept hitting, unleashing years of bottled emotion. Standing over Rankin's remains, Dexter experienced something new: genuine human rage followed by genuine remorse. For the first time, he killed purely from emotion, not compulsion or planning. Harry's ghost delivered the most damning assessment. "That's the first human thing you've done since Rita died." This murder was different, driven by grief and love rather than the dark passenger. The kill brought no satisfaction, no justice served, just a dead stranger, and the realization that Dexter could lose control completely when pushed past his limits. Rankin's death ended Dexter's illusion of being a controlled, methodical killer. It proved that underneath his rituals and justification was just another violent man who'd kill anyone when angry enough. This breakdown would define the rest of the series. From here, Dexter's kills became increasingly impulsive and emotionally driven. His code revealed itself as elaborate self-deception. Rankin was a horrible man, but that isn't a capital offense. What makes this kill significant is it's honestly that Dexter wasn't hiding behind noble justification. He was just a broken man who snapped. It was the most human thing he's ever done, and the most revealing. That rage was ugly, but the most dangerous thing to Dexter was still someone with a badge and a working brain. Stan Liddy was a sleazy ex-cop with a vendetta, but he was also the most competent investigator to ever target Dexter Morgan. His mistake was getting too close to the truth and refusing to back down when things got dangerous. Quinn suspected Dexter's involvement in Rita's death because the murder didn't fit Trinity's pattern. Desperate for answers, but constrained by department politics, he hired Stan Liddy, a disgraced narcotics detective who had been fired for corruption but still had investigative skills. Liddy saw this as his chance for redemption. Proving that a respected forensic analyst was actually a serial killer would restore his reputation and get him back on the force. He threw himself into the investigation with the obsessive dedication of a man with nothing left to lose. Liddy's surveillance was extensive and professional. He photographed Dexter and Lumen disposing of plastic wrap bundles from Dexter's boat, captured video of them practicing kill techniques, and documented suspicious late-night activities that no innocent person would be doing. When Quinn tried to call off the investigation, partly because of his growing relationship with Deborah, Liddy refused. He invested too much time and uncovered too much evidence to quit now. The corrupt cop had stumbled onto the biggest case of his career, and he wasn't walking away. Liddy even illegally entered Miami Metro to steal surveillance equipment under Quinn's name, showing how far he'd go to build his case. Liddy's final gambit was capturing Dexter in a surveillance van. He tased him unconscious and was demanding a full confession on video, believing this would give him the evidence needed to destroy Dexter completely. But Liddy made a fatal error. He underestimated who he was dealing with. When Dexter broke free and kicked him in the face, sending him flying towards the front of the van, Liddy tried to stab him with a knife. It was a desperate move by a cornered man who knew his life was in danger. Dexter, with years of martial arts training and killing experience, easily overpowered the aging ex-cop. In what technically qualified as self-defense, he stabbed Liddy in the chest, ending both the investigation and the investigator. Quinn arrived at the marina to find Liddy's van locked and apparently empty. A drop of Liddy's blood fell on Quinn's shoe, unnoticed evidence that would make him a prime suspect in his hired investigator's death. Dexter had already destroyed Liddy's surveillance footage and equipment, erasing months of evidence that could have exposed him. Later, he would tamper with blood evidence to clear Quinn, protecting the boyfriend of his sister while covering up his own crime. Liddy's body was discovered, but his murder remained unsolved. The corrupt cop who had gotten closest to exposing the Bay Harbor butcher became just another statistic. Liddy's death proved that even professional investigators couldn't safely pursue Dexter. Despite his corruption, Liddy had been genuinely trying to solve crimes and expose what he believed was a dangerous killer loose in Miami. Stan Liddy was absolutely corrupt, and his methods were in fact illegal, but he was also right about everything. Dexter was a serial killer. He was dangerous, and he needed to be stopped. Liddy's only mistake was thinking that he could take down a predator without becoming prey himself. The irony is that Liddy died doing what cops are supposed to do, investigating criminals and seeking justice. His corruption didn't negate the fact that he was trying to stop a monster. Even after Liddy, Dexter didn't stop. He just took the paranoia with him, straight into Nebraska. Norm seemed like a helpful small-town guy when he fixed Dexter's flat tire and pointed him towards the Mitchell house. But greed and paranoia turned the Shady Lane motel owner into an extortionist, and Dexter's response revealed just how far he'd fallen from Harry's code. Dexter had traveled to Nebraska to investigate Jonah Mitchell and the remaining Trinity killer victims. The remote location and family tragedy investigation had him on edge, dealing with ghosts both literal and metaphorical, as hallucination Brian urged him towards darker impulses. Norm ran a rundown motel and supplemented his income by growing marijuana in the surrounding cornfields. He was paranoid about law enforcement, but still helpful to paying customers, at least until he discovered something that made him see dollar signs. When Norm spotted Dexter's forensic kit in his car trunk, his helpful demeanor vanished. The expensive knives, professional tools, and Dexter's soft hands convinced him he was dealing with a federal agent, DEA, ATF, or FBI. For a small-time pot grower, that meant potential disaster. But instead of running, Norm saw an opportunity. He stole Dexter's entire kill kit, including the knives that were essential to his ritual, and decided to turn the situation into profit. $10,000 for the return of the tools, a fortune for a failing motel owner. Norm's logic was simple. If this guy was really a Fed, he'd pay anything to get his equipment back. If he wasn't, what could one soft-handed city boy do about it? The confrontation took place in Norm's storage shed, surrounded by marijuana plants and glass jars full of his illegal harvest. Norm laid out his terms, $10,000 or the knives disappear forever. When Dexter mockingly agreed but demanded the tools first, Norm realized he was being played. Pulling out what he believed was a loaded gun, Norm threatened Dexter's life. "Either you give me the money or you're a dead man," he declared, thinking he held all the cards. But Dexter knew something Norm didn't. The gun wasn't loaded. He already checked it after taking it from a convenience store clerk earlier. Instead of backing down or negotiating, Dexter grabbed a nearby pitchfork and drove it straight into Norm's stomach. As Norm died, impaled on farming equipment, Hallucination Brian delivered brutal honesty about Dexter's true nature. He didn't kill because victims deserved it. He killed because he enjoyed watching life leave their eyes, regardless of guilt or innocence. Unable to dispose of the body in his usual ocean dumping ground, Dexter improvised. He threw threw Norm's corpse into a grain silo, watching it disappear under tons of corn. "Hope you took a souvenir," Brian remarked, highlighting how this kill lacked even the ritualistic elements that supposedly distinguished Dexter's murders. The casual disposal matched the casual killing. No ceremony, no blood slide, no sense of justice served. Just a dead extortionist buried in grain like any other piece of farm waste. The next death was about guilt, and this time, Dexter wasn't the only one carrying it. Andrew Briggs was supposed to be just another mark for private investigator Deborah Morgan. Instead, he became her self-destructive escape from the guilt of murdering LaGuerta, and ultimately another casualty of Dexter's toxic presence in everyone's life. Season 8 opened with Deborah in complete freefall. Killing LaGuerta had shattered her moral compass, and she quit the police force to work as a private investigator. Her assignment was simple: pose as a junkie, get close to armed robber Andrew Briggs, and gather evidence for his arrest. But Deborah wasn't acting anymore. The drugs were real, the self-destruction was real, and her relationship with Briggs became genuine. She was using him as an escape from recent events that made her a killer and the life she lost because of Dexter's secrets. Briggs represented everything that Deborah thought she deserved: a criminal relationship with a damaged man, punishment for her sins disguised as romance. When Dexter learned that hitman El Sapo was coming to kill both Briggs and Deborah over some drug deal gone wrong, he panicked. His sister was in danger because of choices she made while spiraling from guilt he caused. Racing to their seedy motel, Dexter arrived to find chaos already brewing. El Sapo was there to settle scores. Deborah was high and vulnerable, and Briggs was trying to protect the woman he genuinely cared about despite barely knowing her real identity. The situation was a powder keg of cross motives: a hitman seeking revenge, a guilt-ridden ex-cop drowning in drugs, her serial killer brother trying to save her, and a small-time criminal caught in the middle. The hotel room confrontation erupted into violence, with multiple people fighting for their lives. El Sapo had come to kill, Briggs was defending himself and Deborah, and Dexter was trying to extract his sister from the chaos she created. In the struggle, Briggs grabbed a knife, probably planning to defend himself against the hitmen who come to murder him. But Dexter was faster, more experienced, and had years of killing reflexes that kicked in during life or death situations. The blade that was meant for El Sapo ended up in Briggs' chest instead. Dexter had killed Deborah's boyfriend while trying to save her, adding another body to the collateral damage of his existence. Briggs died confused and betrayed, stabbed by the brother of a woman he tried to protect. His last moments were spent looking at Deborah, probably wondering why her family had brought death to his door. Dexter begged Deborah to leave with him, to abandon this self-destructive spiral and return to some version of their old life. But she refused, choosing to stay with Briggs' corpse rather than follow the brother who caused all her pain. When El Sapo tried to finish his original mission, Deborah killed him herself, another murder to add to her growing body count. Dexter ended up cleaning up both crime scenes, covering for his sister who hated him while disposing of evidence of his own unnecessary killing. The rift between them deepened with every lie, every cover-up, every death that followed in Dexter's wake. Whenever love got involved, the code simply meant nothing, because what he did next couldn't have been about justice. It was personal. Clint McKay was everything wrong with toxic masculinity wrapped up in one alcoholic package: a con man, compulsive gambler, and child abuser who traumatized his daughter for years before abandoning her. When he returned demanding money, Dexter decided some fathers don't deserve to live. Hannah had shared the horrific details of her childhood with Dexter, how Clint threw her into a pond at the age of 6 to teach her how to swim, then watched her nearly drown without helping, how he disappeared for months, leaving her with an equally damaged mother, how his cruelty had shaped her into someone who solved problems with poison. Clint was the reason she ran away at 15 with a serial killer, the source of her trust issues and violent tendencies. Dexter saw him as the root cause of Hannah's damage, making him a legitimate target in his mind. Clint's return was all about money. He showed up at Hannah's greenhouse demanding $20,000, convinced his successful daughter owed him for the sacrifice of raising her. When Hannah refused, his true nature emerged. In a drunken rage, Clint destroyed her greenhouse, the one place where Hannah found peace growing beautiful things. He smashed plants, overturned tables, and demolished months of careful work while screaming about ungrateful children and family obligations. Watching Hannah's pain triggers something protective in Dexter. This was about eliminating someone who hurt the woman he loved. Dexter's approach was calculated and personal. He lured Clint into his boat under false pretenses, then gave him the full ritual treatment: plastic wrap, kill table, the complete ceremony usually reserved for confirmed murderers. When Clint realized what was happening, he called Dexter the devil, perhaps the most accurate character assessment anyone has ever made. Dexter's response was chilling and as honest honesty. I think that's just me. The confession revealed everything. Dexter wasn't a righteous avenger or a tortured vigilante. He was exactly what Clint called him, a devil who found ways to justify his nature through elaborate moral codes and careful victim selection. The knife went into Clint's chest with the same precision Dexter used on serial killers, but this time there was no pretense of justice, just a man eliminating an obstacle to his happiness. As he dumped Clint's weighted body into the ocean, Dexter delivered a final insult. Sink or swim, daddy. Dexter was literally giving Clint the same choice he'd given his 6-year-old daughter. The mockery revealed how personal this kill had been. Clint's death marked Dexter's complete abandonment of his supposed principles. For the first time, he'd given someone the full ritual treatment, while knowing they weren't a murderer. The plastic, the table, the ceremony, all of it had been perverted to serve his personal desires, rather than any concept of justice. This kill established the template for future violations. When family or loved ones were threatened, Harry's code meant nothing. Dexter would kill anyone who hurt people he cared about, using the full weight of his murderous skills against targets who didn't deserve death. The ritualistic nature made it worse than his other code violations. Oscar Prado had been an accident, Rankin a moment of rage, and Norm a convenience kill, but Clint received the full treatment, as if being a bad father was equivalent to being a serial killer. Dexter was rewriting the rules, one kill at a time. Comment down below, which of these victims do you think proved that he was never in control? Next, Dexter pulls out all the stop by killing someone better than him in every way. Sergeant Logan was everything Dexter pretended to be, a protector, a mentor, a genuinely good man who made his community safer. His murder represented the final proof that Dexter Morgan had become the very monster he spent decades hunting. Logan embodied small-town law enforcement at its best. He coached wrestling, mentored troubled kids, and treated everyone with respect regardless of their background. When Jim Lindsay arrived in Iron Lake, Logan welcomed him as a neighbor and friend, never suspecting he was harboring America's most prolific serial killer. The relationship between Logan and Harrison had been particularly meaningful. Logan served as a father figure to a boy whose real father was a killer, offering guidance and stability that Dexter never could. He represented the normal life Harrison craved but could never have. When Angela Bishop arrested Dexter on suspicion of being the Bay Harbor Butcher, Logan struggled to reconcile the accusations with the man he knew. Jim Lindsay had been a quiet, helpful member of their community, nothing like the monster from Miami Metro's files. Even while holding Dexter in custody, Logan treated him with kindness. He brought food, made conversation, and seemed genuinely concerned about his friend's well-being. Logan represented the best of humanity, someone who could show compassion even to those accused of terrible crimes. His decency made what came next even that more horrific. Dexter's escape plan was simple, but required Logan's cooperation. Luring the sergeant close to his cell, Dexter grabbed him and slammed his head repeatedly against the bars. The attack was sudden, vicious, and completely unprovoked. When Logan briefly seemed willing to give up his keys to avoid further violence, Dexter had his chance for mercy. But when Logan reached for his gun, doing exactly what any police officer would do when attacked by a dangerous suspect, Dexter snapped his neck with cold efficiency. The kill was purely practical. Logan wasn't a threat to innocent people, wasn't a murderer who'd escaped justice, wasn't anything except an obstacle between Dexter and freedom. For the first time in his killing career, Dexter murdered someone purely for convenience, without even the pretense of moral justification. Dexter showed no remorse for killing a genuinely good man. He was focused entirely on escape, treating Logan's corpse as nothing more than an inconvenience to step over on his way to freedom. When Harrison discovered Logan's body and confronted his father, Dexter's justification was pathetic. He was gonna shoot me, as if a police officer drawing his weapon on an escaping suspect was somehow unreasonable or unexpected. The excuse revealed everything about who Dexter had become. The man who once claimed to only kill those who deserved it was now murdering innocent people and blaming them for their own deaths. Logan's death was the final straw for Harrison. Watching his father justify the murder of a man who had been nothing but kind to both of them, Harrison finally understood what Dexter really was. Not a vigilante seeking justice, but a predator who killed anyone standing in his way. The murder led directly to Dexter's death. Harrison's decision to shoot his father stemmed from the realization that Logan's murder proved Dexter was irredeemable. The good man's death had finally exposed the monster completely. Logan's murder also proved that all of Dexter's supposed growth, all of his attempts at redemption, all his years of trying to be better had been meaningless. When survival was at stake, he reverted to pure predator instinct. Sergeant Logan was the most innocent victim on this entire list. He'd done nothing except be kind to a man who turned out to be a killer. His murder was the ultimate proof that Dexter's code had always been a lie. Elaborate self-justification for a man who simply enjoyed killing. Logan died for doing his job and treating people with basic human decency. His death revealed Dexter as exactly what he'd always been, a cold-blooded killer who found sophisticated ways to justify his nature. For a man who swore only to kill the guilty, Dexter Morgan left behind a trail of bodies that told a different story. Every unjustified kill exposed the truth. The code didn't make Dexter good, it just made him feel better about being a monster. Next up, I'm going to be breaking down the biggest plot twist in Dexter.